time to stick around, after 11 to go more in depth on stuff if anybody has any questions, and we can go through actual scenarios or whatever if you'd like. So, but by all means, feel free to chime in with questions at any time. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here with the slides. If I can figure out which screen it's on. Okay. Is that working for everybody? Let's try this. Here we go.
Yes, we can see it, Jesse.
Okay, great. Okay, so topics we'll go over today, getting access to the system, kind of a quick introduction to the system. We'll go over the standard monthly reports, talk a little bit about flexible reports, or also called SQR reports. Briefly mention some other reporting tools that are available in the eReports system, and then go over the monthly reconciliation process, which is pretty important. So for access, the link on the PDF will take you to our access request form on the CFAS Finance website. Basically, with any system access, there are some trainings in the Buckeye Learn system that you have to go through. So there's a core courses curriculum that's about 5 individual courses that have a lot to do with data security, as well as the annual Protecting Institutional Data training course. So once you've done those, you can complete that web form, and that comes to me to get your access. There's the URL for eReports listed here. And then if you are in an off-campus network, which most of you are, to access eReports, you also have to have the Cisco AnyConnect VPN. So there's a link to that download for the software there. You'll likely need help from a regional tech to get that installed. I think, if your computer is locked down without administrative rights or whatever, you'll probably need their help to download that software. And then the Buckeye Pass or the Duo login, which is what really any OSU system that has non-public information, which I'm surprised they haven't done that with eRequest yet, but basically PeopleSoft, any of your personnel stuff, and then eReports have to have that Duo login. If you aren't familiar, if you have a smartphone, it basically sends you a push notification that you can hit accept on. That allows you to log into the system, but it can also call your landline phone, and you hit 1 and it lets you in. So it's just an extra step of security to get into these systems. So once you, of course, you have to have a name.number. So if you're really new and haven't activated your name.number yet, but I think we're pretty good about making sure that people have that good to go by the time they leave orientation. So name.number, the Buckeye Learn training, complete the access form, and then you're good to go. eReports does require Internet Explorer to work. It's one of the few things that we actually still use Internet Explorer for, it seems, but it's the only supported browser by that company. There are a lot of settings in the security settings that you have to change for Internet Explorer to get it to work, as well as a plugin for those flexible reports to work. So again, you can work with your regional tech to make sure those things are set up for your system and good to go. So eReports is the reporting system for the university. It takes all the information from the general ledger and organizes it into these somewhat meaningful reports. And then this is also sometimes referred to as your financial statements. And only OSU employees can have access to this. So even if you have fiscal volunteers helping out in your office, they have to have a name dot number. An employee has to have a name dot number to be able to access this system. They can, by all means, help you with your reconciliation, but they won't be able to pull the reports for you. So basically, the process is that a transaction occurs, and that could be a voucher payment on a purchase order, P-card purchase, journal entries. Those transactions happen, they hit the University General Ledger, and then the report helps put that in a meaningful way for you to review. And when we start talking about eReports, really the three most important reports are your standard monthly reports. You have a 3OS61 report, which helps you find the balances, the cash balances on the funds that you own. The 7OS-90 report, which is really a budget report, helps you see what your year-to-date activity is on a given fund. And then the 4OS-91 report is the detail report. So I'm going to switch over to my browser here. Is everybody seeing my eReports system now? Or is it still showing the PDF, Leanne?
No, it's showing your eReports.
Okay, good. So once you get into the system, this is kind of what the home page looks like. And to get to your standard monthly reports, there's kind of two ways to get there. You have your the folders on the left. You want to go to Financials, and then Standard Monthly Reports, and then choose the fiscal year. So we're in the current fiscal year, FY18. Then you'll go to our colleges folder, FAES, and then OSU Extension. And then you'll notice in here that all the folders are 5.5 folders. You don't see any 5.7s for the county orgs. All of the county orgs roll up into a D node called 5502. So you want to click on the 5502 folder, and then it gives you your list of your standard monthly reports. So here we have the 3OS61, we have the 4OS91, and the 7OS90. You really don't have to worry about the other ones. Those are just the three that are the most helpful for you in reviewing your transactions. And you'll also notice that there are PDFs and Excel sheets listed here, so you can certainly download those to Excel if you're savvy with Excel and can manipulate that to show what you want to see. Let's go back to the PDF here. So the first one, your cash balance report, helps you identify cash balances for the funds that you own, and those are your unit's responsibility to keep track of and reconcile. So this is a kind of year-to-date report, fiscal year-to-date, not calendar year. So all of our county budgets really run off of a calendar year, January to December. The university runs off of a separate cycle, July through June. So July 1st each year, we switch to the next fiscal year, and those year-to-date things kind of reset. So that makes it difficult for the county units because you really have to think about your carry forward from the end of the last fiscal year, those 6 months, into the new fiscal year for the last 6 months. So that would be on your 7OS-90 year-to-date. This one is really from its inception. So for the cash balance, this is the money. When you look at that cash balance column on this report, that is the money available in that fund completely. So that's taking into account every transaction that's ever happened on that fund. So when we go into our eReports here, we'll pull up a 61 report. Now, a couple years ago, they changed this so that all the counties rolled up into one report as opposed to having individual folders for your county within each, within that 5502 folder. So when you get into the PDF, really the best thing to do is do a Control F to search find on your org, because as you can see, this report is several pages. It's got a page for every county. So we'll just start with the first county here, Belmont County 57001. As you look on the left, you'll see all the fund numbers that they own. So these would be funds that roll up under their org 57001. And then you'll see all sorts of columns about equity and liability and assets, et cetera. Really what you're looking for here is your cash balance column. So this would be the money that's available in that fund. Now this isn't going to show you release time or pesticide safety education program money, state money, so 530801 or 560808, or any grants and contracts through OSP, because all those would be things we call shared funds. This is just for the funds that you own. So, and you can also, it's a good overview of those funds that you own, because sometimes if a fund doesn't get used within a fiscal year, it's not going to show up on your other standard monthly reports like your 91 and your 90 report. So you may not be looking after that activity because it's not showing up there, but it does still have a cash balance listed here. One of the ones that may be more interesting to you now is your endowment interest funds. Since the decision was made to no longer cut checks back to the committees, the 4-H committees for that endowment interest, and it has to be spent directly out of this fund. So you'll probably be paying more attention to those cash balances now than you had in the past. So the next report is the 70S-90 report. And you use this report to view balances in budgets and funds that you share but don't own. So that would again be like the release time fund 550052. If you have any educators that have a partial appointment on an OSP project, they're likely earning some release time back from that project into this fund. Now, I'm sure some of you are aware that if you had release time, that carry forward has not been posted yet for this fiscal year. I think I've talked to a few of you about that already, but basically the university is trying to figure out, or the college is trying to figure out how to do release time consistently among all of the departments, extension included. So they're trying to make some decisions just logistically about how they're going to transfer that carry forward. Rest assured, the carry forward that you had from last fiscal year is still there, and there is still earnings from those last few quarters that haven't posted yet as part of that carry forward. But my hope is that it's already close to the end of February, so I don't know that we'll get that done for March, but I keep on pushing to get that done quickly because I think we're ready to go. We just have to have the go ahead from the college leadership and finance. So you can also view your purchase order activity on this report. So at the bottom of every fund summary sheet, it'll show purchase orders of yours that use that fund, and it will show the balance remaining on those POs. And then you can also view a summary of information over the fiscal year. So it'll show you the period activity and then the year-to-date activity being fiscal year-to-date. So again, that's July through June. So right now you'll see activity from July through February on that fund. And this is a fiscal year-to-date report based on the activity for a particular org. And again, that means the report starts over in July. So if you aren't already doing some sort of a shadow system to maintain your fund balances, because most of our funds have, even though it's a single fund, you've got kind of several pots of money within that fund for different program areas, et cetera. So if you aren't doing a shadow spreadsheet of some sort, I highly suggest that you do. Makes it a lot easier. Unfortunately, that's just one of the tools that eReports can't do very well for us, is to say, okay, this is the amount of money we have in our 4-H pot. This is the amount of money we have in our A&R pot. So having a separate system, whether that be in QuickBooks or Quicken, or if it's just a simple spreadsheet, that can make your life a lot easier. And I'll be happy to talk with anybody about that, further. So let's take a look at a 90 report real quick. And when you go in this way from the main menu, you will always see just the most recent standard monthly report. So in this case, you'll see it says month ending January. So the January report came out the first week of February, and the February report will come out the first week of March, etc. And I'll show you in a minute how to get to your previous month's reports if for some reason you didn't have time to get to reconcile the previous month. I know that never happens to anybody. So, so here's just an example of what the 70S90 output looks like. So again, we'll kind of start with picking on Belmont County here. So the report is broken out first by org, then by fund, and then by project and program value. So you will have a separate page for each org fund combination, and then project and program value combinations thereafter. So you see this first page has Belmont's miscellaneous fund. It shows the account number of a particular charge that hit this month. Or I guess in this case, it doesn't necessarily have had to have been this month. It could be year to date. So that's why you always want to look into the actual column here with period and year to date activity. So we've got, looks like a phone bill for the month, and then the year to date that was spent on that. And then also down below, you can see they've got the PO numbers here for what's hitting that fund. So it does look like we have AT&T POs, and it shows the amount encumbered, and then and that should be the remaining amount on that purchase order. As we go down through, you'll notice that most of these are funds that they own, but then you will also see their shared funds. So in this case, the 530137, the PSEP program, this shows the budget that was entered for that shared fund. Most of the time on your own funds, you aren't going to see a budget entry in this budget section. You'll just see your activity in the period and year to date. For the shared funds, you're going to see usually something in this budget column. Now that's what I was talking about with the release time. They're talking about, instead of entering it as a budget entry, we'll actually do a fund transfer. So you'll actually see instead of a account for expense budget pool, you'll see a revenue hit for a period, and then that will just show up with your year-to-date activity moving forward. So it really won't affect how you see the balance in that fund, but it will. Just know that it won't have a budget in here, so you won't see anything in your variance pre-encumbrance section when that hits that way. You'll also see the state support here, 53801. Most of the time, this is going to be for the county educator cost share and the payroll that hits for county educators. You can see here, this was a cost distribution entry. As of January 1st, just another FYI, that did change. So we're actually input the county cost share for the educators directly into the HR system, so it's hitting the commissioner fund directly as opposed to being transferred via this, this cost distribution. So let's take a look at our next type of report here, which is the most fun report, the 4OS 91 Detail Activity Summary. So this one has, just like the name implies, detail for every transaction that's hit that month. So you use this report to review the accuracy of the transactions that have hit your org. And then also, as part of the reconciliation process, you verify that you have the documentations for those transactions. And this is a month-only report, so it doesn't show any historical data, doesn't show any year-to-date data. It just shows transactions that hit in this month. So let's take a quick look at a 91 report. So as you can see for Belmont County, again, like in the 90 report, we saw that there was a period activity of the 437.37. So this shows you more detail about what that transaction actually was. So you can see here we have the account number, local call charges. It shows you a voucher ID and the PR number associated with that, and the purchase order number and requisition number associated with that. So that should give you all the information you need to go like into PeopleSoft or pull a different report to get more information about that transaction. Most of the time, you'll see this, the journal ID come up here first. Whenever it starts with an AP, that was an accounts payable transaction, so there should be a voucher ID or a PR number associated with that. If it's a regular expense transfer, fund transfer, journal ID, it'll start with zeros and not the AP. We may have an example of that here. So yeah, we've got a regular journal entry here on the next page that shows an expense transfer that was done. So again, this is just activity for the period, for the month that you are in, and shows you the detail for all those transactions. Okay, so that was just a quick overview of the standard monthly reports. Real quickly, to get into your past months reports, it's pretty easy. Close out a couple of these tabs here. So again, if you're going just from the main menu and drilling down to this report, you'll just get this month's report. To get to past month's reports, up here in the upper left corner, there's a little open document icon. When you click on that, it opens up a window. And the first time you go in, you'll have to drill down through those folders the same as you would from the main menu. After you've been in there, it'll go to the last folder that you were in. So in this case, I went OSU Financials, FY18, etc., down to the dnode folder, and then I can pull up a, say, the 4OS 91 report. I highlight that, and then down here in Options, you expand that column, and it gives you a drop-down menu to see all your reports for this fiscal year. So in July, for example, if you hadn't done June yet and hadn't pulled that yet, you'll actually have to go back to the FY18 fiscal year to get June's report. Okay, so beyond the standard monthly reports, one of the great tools within eReports is the Flexo reports, or SQR reports. So your standard monthly reports are good for a snapshot of where you are now and where you stand as far as your budget goes, but they don't help you do any forecasting, searching for past problems with org fund mismatches, or do tracking of what we call subchart field, which would be user defines, program values, project numbers. If you use those consistently with all of your expense and revenue transactions, then you can use the flexible report to pull that information in for a specific time frame. So you can go from the beginning to current, or you can go just for the last year if you want to know in the calendar year. You know, how much money was spent on in-state travel for user-defined of A&R for Ag Natural Resources. You could pull that in one report to get a snapshot of the total expense that was paid on that chart field combination. So just like getting to your standard monthly reports, there's a folder for the flexible reports. Go to the next slide here. So when you are in the main menu, you'll start with going into the financials folder again. And this time, instead of going to standard monthly reports, you go to the flexible report folder. And from here, you've got all of your flexible reports available to you. The numbers are a little bit different, but the last two numbers are going to be the same as what your standard monthly report would be. So your 61 flexible is going to be your summary of assets and liabilities, your cash balance report. The 91 is going to be your detail report. And then the 90 is going to be your budget versus actual report, so your year-to-date summary. The one I use the most, honestly, is the 91 detail report, because it actually does show you the detail of the transaction. So I'm usually using flexible reports to search for problems. And one of the good tools about the flexible report, which we'll talk about in the reconciliation process here in a minute, is that you can actually use this report monthly to determine if you used someone else's fund that didn't belong to you, and vice versa if someone used your fund. And then you don't have to go through the actual reconciliation balancing of a fund for each month, because you can verify that all the transactions were actually on your chart field and not somebody else. So that keeps you from having to pull that the previous month's cash balance, adding in your revenues, subtracting your expenses, and then balancing that to your current month cash balance. So if you are still doing that and not doing the flexible report, let me know, and we can talk through how to transition over and save you some time. So when you go into a flexible report, it may look a little daunting at first, but it's really not that bad. Really what you're doing is setting specific criteria for what you want to find. So if I'm looking for, we'll use that example of travel again. I want to look for all the travel that has gone against, we'll use Coshocton County, for example. You always have to set at least one print order, and that's what helps set up how the page displays when it outputs. I always try to set it up just like a standard monthly report would look, with a 1 on the org, a 2 on the fund, and a 3 on the account. And then your output PDF looks just like a standard monthly report, and that's more familiar for your eyes. So we'll look at 57003. I don't care what fund it was in, and I want to see all out-of-state travel, 63405. And I'm going to look for just this fiscal year. So I'm going to do fiscal year 18, starting in July, and then we'll go through, so the report doesn't take that long, we'll just go through October. And then you can click on, for the actual detail, you want to make sure you hit the accounts payable and P-card yes buttons, or else it's not going to give you your voucher IDs or journal IDs associated with those transactions. You'll see it listed, but you won't necessarily know what the voucher ID was. So then you can just click the run button. You'll get a little notification that says this report's running in the background. Just click OK, and it'll take you back to your list here. We'll just go back to the slide real quick. So those slides 14, 15, 16 are kind of what we were just going over, and 17. Now, when your report is done, you have to kind of hit this refresh button up here in the top corner until the output comes out. And of course, the fewer detail that you put in the criteria and the longer the time frame that you're searching, the more searching it has to do in the background to pull that information in. So if you're really detailed and specific about what you're looking for, it'll come back pretty quick. The less detail you have, the longer it's going to take to run. And there we go, it popped up. So right underneath of the detail activity report, you see this detail activity report output. So that's where you want to click. I don't know why my icons aren't showing up over here, but you can see there's different types here. You have like basically a web page, a PDF, the log, and then the CSX delimited for Excel. So that's what you want to do if you want to download to Excel. But we'll just take a look at the PDF here. And so the first page that comes up is just recapping the parameters that you put in. If you got a report back really quickly, like as soon as you ran it, chances are there might be an error message here, like you mistyped a fund number or added a space between commas with multiple funds or something like that. So you'll see a big error message show up right here, and it would just be one page if there wasn't any output. But we do have a couple pages of output here. So you can see that, again, because I put print order on org and then 2 on fund, it's going to break out the funds into different pages. So first we have their miscellaneous fund. We've got one out-of-state travel for Emily Adams. Looks like it was probably a registration payment coming out of there. The commissioner fund, we've got another travel. That looks like an actual reimbursement. And then that's it for overnight travel for Coshocton for the year so far. So again, a good tool to be able to summarize that data quickly. And of course, being able to download that into Excel and manipulate it within there can really help as well. Especially if you're looking for totals, sums, averages, etc. It's easier to pull that through in Excel. Okay, about halfway through, and we're halfway through the slides, so we're in good shape. Again, we've got more slides about those activity flexible reports there. Just something to note, from our FAES Finance webpage, I kind of pulled these slides together from various other eReports trainings that we have available here. So if you go to our training tab and go into financial software and eReports, this page has information on your monthly reconciliation, the kind of pulling up standard monthly reports, and then down here in the table below, we've got in-depth PDF training documents on accessing eReports, reading eReports, reconciling eReports, and then the advanced reports is where we talk about the flexible reports and variance reports and those sorts of things. And there's also videos from our YouTube page that correspond with these PDFs that Cindy had done previously. I don't think I'm going to update these in total until we transition into Workday and this information becomes obsolete, because there really hasn't been any big changes to eReports in the last few years. And so even though these are a couple years old, they are still accurate in their information. So, but again, a great reference tool with lots of screenshots and really walks you through the process of doing those different types of advanced reports. So some other reports that are available beyond your standard monthly reports, the P-card reports. So if you do have a P-card in your office, which I hope that you do. If you don't, come talk to me because we want to get you one. P-card reports, you've got your reconciliation report, which is the big one. So instead of bugging Vicky and Leanne to get you a copy of what transactions have hit the card for that month. You can run a P-card transaction report on your org, and it'll show you for that month what transactions have hit, and you can make sure that you have e-requests to correspond with all those. You have the paid and unpaid voucher reports. So if you do have a lot of blanket and term purchase orders for your utilities and whatnot, you can run this report to quickly get a summary of invoices that have been paid on your various purchase orders, and you can do multiple purchase orders at a time. You can do it by fund, by org, etc. And same way with the purchase order report. If you want to know your order reports that may not have been closed yet, we really like to have purchase orders from the previous year closed within a few months of the next year. Tyler Schechter and Shirley Lynn from the Columbus Business Office do a pretty good job of sending out a yearly report on that. And then we just go in and close those if you guys didn't respond, you needed them left open for any reason. So you don't have to worry about that too much. They're kind of taking care of that down there. But if you're ever curious or want to get ahead of the game, you can obviously use that purchase order report. Your inventory reports for capital equipment are important. So when we do our capital equipment reports back to the asset management every year, you have to pull those to verify what's on the report, if you still have that equipment, if it needs retired, if it needs its value changed, etc. The variance report is another one of the interactive reports or flexible reports. It can be really helpful for your budget process for the next year. The nice thing is it can show two different periods and 2 different years of data on a roll-up level next to each other. So it can summarize your data within like supplies, services, travel, payroll. So you're just kind of getting a quick snapshot of each of those expense categories. And then and you can compare that from one month to another or 1 year to another. And that can help you with putting budgets together for the next year. And then there's also e-request and e-travel reports, which really probably aren't real helpful for you guys, but we do use them occasionally to report on just various things within e-request and e-travel. One of the things we do with those is like exceptions. When there's an exception form loaded to an e-request or an e-travel, there's a box that we can put an exception description in, and then we use this report at the end of the year to pull that data so we can report back to the SFO on what trends we have in exceptions. So we'll spend the last few minutes here on talking about reconciliation. Reconciliation is really the most important part of this whole process with the reports. That's the reason you're pulling these reports to begin with. And really, what we're looking for is to make sure that we know what transactions were submitted, that they are correct, that you know what they are, and that they should hit your chart field. Then you can know how to what to request a correction on. So if you see that your fund was used with another org or vice versa, you can contact your accountant in Columbus and work on getting that changed. There could be various reasons why that could happen. It could be a miskey on the e-request side. If it's a big journal entry, somebody could, it's easy to transpose some of these numbers, especially the commissioner funds. They get kind of jumbled sometimes. So that's really what we're looking for is making sure you know what transactions are that hit and that there aren't any errors. So it is your individual unit's responsibility to reconcile all the transactions for the funds that you own and the funds that are budgeted shared to you. So that would be all those funds listed on your balance sheet, the 61 report, plus if you have pest ed, release time, etc., that's shared with you, as well as OSP projects. If you have OSP projects in your unit, you want to make sure you're reconciling those transactions as well. So it's kind of what Cindy outlined in her original training as a 6-step process. The first one, which we touched on a little bit earlier, was to run the fund exception report, that flexible report that can tell you if you used someone else's money by mistake, or if someone else used your money by mistake. Second, you can see if someone else, or if you use someone else's money. Confusing. 3 is looking at the documentation, so making sure you have backup or know what those transactions are that have hit your detail activity summary. Reviewing that for accuracy, and then checking that against your local budgets. So, if you're keeping track of expenses that are for a program area, a specific program or project, you want to make sure that you're tracking those monthly, and then certifying that has been completed each month. So the fund exception report, again, we talked about this briefly. Your fund, there's nothing that stops somebody else from using your fund. The system doesn't, it knows who owns what funds, but, some departments have several orgs and several funds that they use, and they use those orgs and funds interchangeably, and they don't really care. But in our case, we do have specific org fund combinations that we're worried about, so we want to make sure that that's correct. And again, eRequest, PeopleSoft, et cetera, doesn't stop that from happening. So you'll even see funds not just within Extension or within our college, but university wide, like if there's a 500334, it's really easy to hit 500337 when you're keying in and not realize it, and then you'll have something from the College of Pharmacy or something show up on your report. So you want to look at the detail activity report. When you use someone else's fund, it shows up on your detail activity report. It's that standard monthly report. So because that is broken out by org, you will see your org and a fund you own on one page. You scroll the next page and it's a different fund, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you're looking at those fund numbers and names on that 91 report, because from time to time you may see a fund that you don't recognize there, and so that's when you want to question that, call up your accountant in Columbus, and figure out why that transaction happened that way. And then we can do a expense transfer or something to correct that. So that's really the easier one, is to figure out if you use someone else's money. It's harder to figure out if someone else used your money because it's not going to show up on your standard monthly report. Again, because it's going to be under their org and your fund, so you're not looking at reports on their org, and you don't know necessarily that your fund hit that org. So that's where the flexible report comes into play. So that's what this number 2 is talking about, that I used the wrong fund. Or sorry, that was what number 1 was talking about. Number 2 was talking about, and I was confusing myself here. Number 1 is talking about running that flexible report. Number 2 is talking about looking at your 91 report to see if you use something incorrectly. Let's take a look at that flexible report real quick, and I want to show you a little trick to make it easier to run every month. So when you go into your flexible reports, detail activity report, we are again looking for other people that used our money. So you'll want to do a print order of 1 in the org, but leave the org blank because you're looking for orgs that aren't your own. So then you want to exclude your own org because we don't want to see transactions that actually were correct. So we'll use Coshocton again as an example. Then we go into the fund print order, and then this is where you would put all of the funds that you own or are shared with you. So you want to make sure you go through your 61 report and then include the 53801 for the educator payroll, 560808, which is the federal for the payroll, and all this is listed in detail on that advanced eReport training slide. So don't worry too much about trying to jot this down. But it's just important to make sure that you include all of your funds that you own, so you aren't pulling in or seeing those transactions that are correct. And then an account, we don't care what account number is being used because we want to see all account numbers. So we'll just put a 3 in the print order and leave the account blank. And then we're just going to run it for the 1 month at a time. And now if you didn't run it last month, you can do it obviously 2 months at a time, and that's fine. But you can choose your fiscal year. You can leave that current fiscal year, current period, current fiscal year, current period, and that's fine. Or you can go through and choose 18 February, or in this case, I guess January was our last report. And then again, you want to click on accounts payable and P card details. And here's the trick. You can save this report, and I would call it, fund exception report or something like that. So then it'll go into your favorites up here, and each month, instead of having to go back and pull those funds that you had to type in, which can get pretty long depending on how many funds you own and how many are shared with you. I mean, easily 10 or 12. You can have all these parameters saved, and then all you have to do is change the month that you're going to run it for. So if you click the save button, save it in your personal folder, give it a name. After you run it, then it's going to show up in your favorites up here. Go to my personal page, and I don't think I have anything listed here now, but that way, again, you don't have to worry about retyping all those things and making an error typing all those things every month. So it'll just take you a couple minutes to run, and then you'll know that that nobody else used your money and you're good to go. So the other, sometimes most difficult part of the reconciliation is making sure that you can document everything that's on your report. So really what you're looking at in this case is your 4OS 91, your detail activity summary, and going pretty much line by line to make sure you know what those transactions are. Sometimes there are some things that you don't need to have a backup for. If you have a voucher ID, for example, for a purchase order payment, and you can view that voucher ID either if you do that through PeopleSoft or on the controller's office website. I think you do have to be logged in on the VPN to do that. But if that voucher ID, if you can see it in there and you know what it was for, then you can just check that off and circle the voucher ID, and that's your reconciliation. That's your documentation for that transaction. On our finance website, under eReports tools for all of our reports, this reconciling eReports report, which I'll pull up here real quick, it goes through. Sorry for the quick scrolling. Detail on how to do both of those. Did someone else use my money? Did I use someone else's money? And then here within the documentation, it tells you, the type of transaction you might be seeing, the documentations that's required, and how to reference that. And then either you can use the PDF tools to do this and save it, then print it for your file, or print it and make handwritten notes. But this really goes through detail on how you document and reference for each transaction that's on your 91 report. And then again, it shows a slide, I think, that shows things that may not have documentation. A lot of this has to do with on-campus stuff, but even like your credit card fees, endowment income, development fees, things that nothing ever got sent to you for, you can just use these links as reference numbers for that, or even print off this page and keep it with your reconciliation folder for the year, and that'll be fine. So this is a great training slide to look at with a lot of good information on reconciliation. And then talking about your budgets, again, when we talk about budgets, we're really kind of talking possibly about two different ways to look at budgets. One is your year-to-date activity for a particular fund, and then the other is looking at funds that are shared with you. So actually looking at those budgets for the 550052 release time and pest debt, et cetera, and making sure that you are on track with those budgets, not running them into the negative, et cetera. So that's really what we're talking about with budgets. But that first slide really goes over, and actually I think this one isn't included in, I added it today because I realized that 5 was missing. So I'll email this out to everybody, reply out to Leanne's last email, so you have these 2 slides as well. Particularly this is again talking about if you are using a shadow system, a shadow spreadsheet to track individual program areas, those sorts of things. You want that to be part of your monthly process, is updating those current balances that those program areas may have within a particular fund. And I think then the last part is just the certification and retention. So we do have and it's listed on our eReports training page, a certification kind of printout document that you can put at the beginning of each of your month's reconciliations to say, check off that everything was done and have that signed off by your CED. And then all you have to do is put it in a file. And I think the retention for reconciliation, I think, is 4 years plus current. I'll have to look that up on our records retention guidelines, but you want to make sure that you're keeping those for the appropriate amount of time before you send those off to be destroyed. So, and one of the first things, if you do ever have a visit from one of the internal auditors out to your county, one of the first things they're always going to want to look for is your reconciliation documentation. So, it's always good to have a nice clean file for those things to make it easy to find when that time comes, because it probably will happen at some point or another. And that is pretty much it. Hey, we're right on time. What do you know?
Yeah, we do have a question. Marianne has a question in the chat.
Gotcha. So process for locating info on journal entries. So most of the time, it really depends on where the journal originated from. If it originated from like an expense transfer that the business office did, we really try to get a copy of that journal entry page faxed out to you guys whenever we do those each month. I shouldn't say we, and I should say when they do those each month. If you have a journal entry that you didn't have any, like an e-request backup for, or if you don't have the access to look that up in PeopleSoft, we can get you the access, and that'll help you figure out where that came from, who did the entry, etc. That's probably a good topic for another time for sure. But you can always email the journal ID to your business office rep and say, hey, can I get more information on this? They should be able to pull up a copy of that journal entry with the long description and the detail there. but you don't necessarily have to have the journal entry as the backup for that transaction if there was something else that you have that prompted that entry. So say it was for a in-service meeting or something like that. If you've got the invitation that says how much was being charged, you can put that there because the journal entry is listed on the eReport and it is available to look up at any time. So you don't necessarily have to have a copy of that in your reconciliation, but whatever you have as the backup for that transaction should be there. And then with like corrections, like if it's an org fund mismatch correction or whatever, really just having the reference to the journal entry that it was correcting, which should be there listed on your 91 report. You can just kind of connect those two and check it off. The journal entries are less, I want to say less important for backup, but as long as you know what that was for and can tie that to something, then you don't necessarily need to have something in the file for it.
Okay, there's another question from Carol about the P-card report.
P-card report, yes. Let's pull up eReports real quick. So if you go into financials, and I think it's under general procurement reports, this is where the paid and unpaid voucher report, P-card reports, inventory, purchase reports, etc. Again, this is one of those that requires that Hyperion plugin. So if you didn't have that installed when your system was set up, contact your tech to get that set up for you. But the P-card transaction report is really what you're looking for. Let me pull it back over here to the right screen. Probably the easiest thing to do on this report, you have to do a from date and a through date, and you actually have to type it in as opposed to using a drop down. It tells you the format you need to use there, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year, and you can just put in your org and then hit process. So let's try 21. I guess I need to follow my own rules. 2101 2018 through 2018, and we'll use our business office order 41021. See if anything's hit that. And then it's going to export it to a PDF and put it on your desktop or wherever you save it. So you hit save, and I'll open the PDF here, and there was no data, go figure. But so this is what the output looks like. It'll have a separate line for each transaction, org fund account. Now this, if it hasn't been reallocated yet, this is just going to be the default chart field that's on your P card, and the account will be that P card clearing 61206. So don't get too bent out of shape if the chart field isn't what was on your e-request, because if it hasn't been reallocated yet, it's not going to show up correctly. But you will see the vendor name that comes through from the bank on that transaction, the amount of that when the transaction went through, when it posted, and then if you have done or if it has been reallocated, that PR number will show up here as well. So if there isn't a PR number there, or if it's still in 61206, likely it hasn't been reallocated yet. The nice thing is if you're running this, toward the end of the month, don't see a PR number there, I would, enter your e-request, put your PR number in there, and fire that off to your reallocator so they can find that transaction quickly, and that'll help them finish up the reallocation for the end of the month. Is that helpful?
Great information. There's another question from...
Yeah, the endowment interest. So that happened last year. Yes, so the decision was made that there wasn't enough oversight on the endowment interest money that was coming out. The 4-H committees were really supposed to be reporting back on how they were using that money, and that wasn't really happening, or at least consistently. So they decided that the money should be spent directly from that fund with the direction of the 4-H committee, as opposed to giving the money to the committee to spend. So we just have to spend that money the way we would any other funds money, using university buying tools. So if we're paying out scholarships, or using it for camp fees, payments directly to camp, we can do purchase orders on that fund. We can do e-requests on convenience orders for, scholarship payments to an individual or to a college if it's using, if you have seniors that you're paying scholarships to college for, that sort of thing. It can all still be done. It just has to be done through the official channels, as opposed to being through your committee directly. And we do have there was a news article about that at some point in time. So I'm just going to do a quick search here on county endowments. So July 10th, 2016, so a year and a half ago, this article talks about, there's a PDF, a county endowment quick guide here, talks about, where you can find your balances on that fund and information about, how you can use it, most common processes, most common expenses that money is used for, and the different tools you have to spend that. So this is a really helpful resource if you haven't looked at that before. Like I said, just search for county or endowment interest on our website, and that'll pull up for you.
A question from Gail.
So Gail, really, the best thing to do is find somebody else who's doing it and get some training from them. I have limited experience in QuickBooks, and a lot of that was from about a decade ago, so I'm sure things have changed since then. I really think it's probably easiest to do those things through spreadsheets, as opposed to tracking them in that system. But I've heard that there are some counties doing that, and it must be working for them if they continue to do so. So I'm not sure about, honestly, who is. We might just have to send out an all call and say, hey, who's doing this on QuickBooks or Quicken, and see if we can get some responses on that. But as far as official training, we don't have anything available on our website, and I'm a novice by all means in those systems, so I can't be of much help. But sorry, I couldn't be more helpful there. Faye says she set up on Excel, and that's easy, so that's good to know. QuickBooks on Amazon. So I'm not really sure what prompted this on Amazon and how we got them to agree to do this, but if you've been buying stuff, P-card managers, if you've been going into the Amazon business and buying stuff recently, you may have noticed that a banner pops up on some categories to say, use a university contracted vendor first sort of statement. From what I understand, it's not actually stopping anybody from ordering something. Now, there may be some things that would be on a restricted category that it possibly wouldn't let you order, but I'm not sure how that would. I haven't heard of anybody actually not being able to go through the checkout process yet. I think really what they're trying to say, what the university is trying to say is, hey, we have these contracted vendors. Be sure you check e-stores, first to make sure their price isn't beating Amazon on this. But with that being said, as far as I know, you can still go through Amazon and make that purchase.
Does anybody have any other questions? This has been wonderful, and I think we do want to pursue having a Zoom on flexible reports at some point.
Yeah. Like I said, this one, I know probably most of you have seen all that information several times before, but hopefully, there was something that sparked your interest in there, and so we can do it as a group again, or if you ever need any one-on-one, I'm happy to do it. So
yeah, a lot of good reminders, and yeah, even for people who've been around here for a while, I've been taking some notes. So.
Like I said, I'll be happy to stick around if anybody's got any questions, but if not, I think we're done with content. So
Okay, thanks everybody for your interest, and let us know if there's any other kind of trainings you'd like to have.